It's interesting too when you look back at the trajectory of where we are now, and then you see these little points that connect all the dots. I had gone through kind of a personal, I'm going to say autoimmune kind of illness over the years that led to a lot of stomach discomfort and things like that. And that moment was really big for me in my journey because it really opened up this path to health and just how powerful it is for not only the food we eat, but also our thoughts and our minds and everything we really, surround ourselves in our environment.
Meta made $45 billion in cash last quarter. And Zuckerberg was just at the White House for that big tech dinner and pledged that they're going to spend at least $600 billion by 2028 on AI. This algorithmic manipulation is a real problem. You can really get whipsawed. And part of what you realize if you go on a spiritual journey is that part of becoming more spiritual means that you're deprogramming thought.
One of the most, I've done hundreds of these demos with people and seeing how people light up in different certain ways. Our bodies, hands down, are the most advanced technology ever created. Like, it's amazing what your body is capable of doing. But when we live in these dysregulated states all the time, then it's not capable to function in the way that it was built.
People are just opening up and there's a greater level of awareness, but I think we just also have to remember that it is our consciousness and our directed thought that is creating the technology.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Love Conquers Fear podcast. This is being recorded on a really special day for me personally, because tonight, I talked about this on episode 1, this is the night where former Governor Rick Perry is coming over to our home with Brian Hubbard. And one of the most important TED Talks that I saw in April, I love going to TED. It's the world's best classroom with some of the world's best teachers and students. But as I went to TED, one talk that really stood out was the talk by the head of the Stanford Brain Center, Ibogaine. And Ibogaine completely heals in one dose vets that are suicidal, as well as opioid addicts. And also it heals alcoholics in one dose. There's no medicine that's that efficacious. And Ibogaine is a psychedelic that comes out of Africa. I think it's West and South Africa. It's a very intense one. It's nothing that I've done because I really don't feel the calling to do it. I don't have that kind of PTSD, but it's an 18 to 24-hour journey. And I remember having dinner at the governor's mansion when Rick Perry was our governor. I was sitting right next to him, and I would have never predicted in a million years that he was going to dedicate the next half of his life to making Ibogaine legal and being able to help cure vets. We actually lose more vets in the United States by suicide than we do by combat. And it's a really honorable mission that he's on. So tonight, my wife and I are hosting a big dinner to raise money to scale up the Ibogaine, Americans for Ibogaine initiative. And, Texas, doesn't do everything right. Certainly it's got its challenges just like any state does. But one of the things they did do right is a few months ago, they passed $50 million of funding for Ibogaine research to help these vets. And to be clear on my stance on it, I would only be in favor of the legalization of something that powerful, used in a very monitored fashion, at a place where someone has gotten a prescription for it. Nobody would want to do Ibogaine anyways as a street drug because it is literally an 18 to 24-hour journey of incredible intensity. It actually, from what I've heard, makes you relive every moment in your life, any trauma that you had, and gets you to face that head on, and then you overcome it. And you overcome it forever. And show me, an antidepressant or any other drug that's legal in the United States that does that. So to be clear, Ibogaine isn't legal today. The $50 million in funding is going towards these studies in the hopes that it will become legal to help these vets. And it's being scaled out around the United States with this Americans for Ibogaine initiative to hopefully get passed in other states. And it's a really interesting history. This guy, Brian Hubbard, who's working with Rick Perry on it. He tried to get this done in Kentucky, got canceled there, and he found a home for it in Texas. And this is more funding, 50 million is more funding than has gone to psychedelics research since the Nixon administration anywhere in the world. And again, if you have curiosity about psychedelics, I've talked about this before, but watch the How to Change Your Mind documentary on Netflix by Michael Pollan, or read his book. It is phenomenal introduction to how powerful these therapeutics can be, and certainly have been very beneficial in my life and have really helped me both, overcome not trauma, but just things that, were challenges in my life to overcome. And it led me on a reading journey that has just been incredible this year. I mean, I've read over 45 books. I've listened to hundreds of podcast episodes, read thousands of articles. As you know, from the last episode, I blended that together now to write science fiction, to really create a different narrative than all the dystopian that's being pushed at us constantly, in terms of, the Terminator scenario or the Matrix scenario. And so the novella that I'm publishing actually next week, which will be live on Amazon by the time you see this, is called The Lattice. And it's a series of 3 short stories, starting with God's final exam, then God's creative power, and then it finishes with God's infinite game. And again, if the word God turns you off, it doesn't turn me off, but, replace it in your head with the word consciousness or source. We have Rosh Hashanah coming up. I'm Jewish, and that means the head of the year. It's our Jewish New Year. And I actually learned for the first time last year in the Torah, I just can't believe this, I never saw this before, that source is capitalized as a proper noun all throughout the Torah, the divine source. So whatever you want to call it, we know that it's loving. And anybody that's done deep meditation or done psychedelics, or had an awakening of some sort, know that the universe is rooted in love. And that's why, I've named this podcast Love Conquers Fear, because the next 10 to 15 years are going to be very intense for humanity. And ultimately, the biggest problem in us reaching the age of abundance for all is getting over our fear-based scarcity, zero-sum mindset. And one of the things that happened that was really amazing is, I've been talking about this for a long time. And last week in the New York Times, Thomas Friedman wrote an article with Craig Mundy. Craig Mundy is of Microsoft fame, and he co-wrote a book with Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt named Genesis, which was really Henry Kissinger's swan song to humanity. He passed away 2 weeks after that book was finished in terms of being written, not published. It published after his death. And it was his swan song to humanity. Well, anyways, Thomas Friedman and Craig Mundy teamed up to write a New York Times article. And it's named something like, I'll put it in the podcast show notes here, the one thing that the U.S. and China can't avoid. And it's the U.S. and China must work together to make it to this age that I've been talking about with AI. That AI is going to be so vastly powerful that we have to get over our squabblings between different forms of government, and we can think what we want about the Chinese government, and certainly I'm not condoning everything or most things that the Chinese government does, but people are people, and genetically we are 99.9% identical. You take the shortest person in China and put them up against the tallest, Black American basketball player in the United States, and they're 99.9% identical from a DNA perspective. And we have to realize the divine nature of humanity, and we have to rediscover that the reality that we actually live in is beautiful. And sometimes that gets very polluted via the programming we get because of this earth school that we're in, where we constantly have to rediscover what it means to grow into a human being that's embodied with love, and to manifest that over and over, lifetime from lifetime to lifetime. So stay tuned for more insights on the dinner that I'm having tonight with Governor Perry and Brian Hubbard. It's going to be amazing. The people showing up for it are amazing. And hopefully this leads to a big spark where this Ibogaine initiative gets scaled around the United States and that we finally have a cure for opioid addicts, alcoholics, as well as suicidal people, including, the veterans that really serve our country. So today I'm really, really honored to have Jon and Lauren on from a company that both Jason Karp and I invested in. He invested in it first and told me about it. And you guys saw him on episode 4 of the podcast. He's an amazing human being. And their company is named Evolve. This is the first time I have an episode where it's a husband and wife team on, or frankly, just two people on at the same time on a podcast. And it's the first time that I've ever had someone on that we invested in, but it's because I love their work. And actually, this room that we're recording in was the room where I first saw the demo. And it's also the room where Mark Gober was over at our house. You saw him on episode 2. And Mark was just blown away by the technology. And my wife, Debra, was also really blown away by it. And we knew we had to invest. And I'm going to ask them, how everything's going. And we're going to get into it. So, hey, welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Fred.
Good
Thanks
to be
for
here
having
with
us.
you. Yeah. Thanks again. Yeah, the room being familiar
I
to
know.
you guys. This was where it made some history,
Yeah. It all
I'll never
started.
forget that when Evolve was a big company that, this was at least one of the stops,
Yep.
along the journey.
It was our first time doing a demo on a movie projector screen. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
was a new one.
The photos looked great. Like, I took the photos from the back and it was just a huge, projection. I mean, it was so, so cool. I'll never forget it. We're going to get into what Evolve is and, specifically what it feels like to use the product. It's amazing. But I want to start out with just a bit of an origin story on you both. Where did you grow up in and what were some of the early childhood influences? Where did you go to school? How did you get to this point of co-founding Evolve together as the husband and wife team?
Yeah. Great. You want to go first?
Sure. So, gosh, grew up on the East Coast in Maryland, and a lot of my childhood, honestly, was athletics. And I know we'll probably talk more, as we go on around programming. And from that journey, there were so many positives, but there were also so many things too that have some different components that of just this pushing and always trying to strive and all that have also had some shifts that have come over time from it. But I was just completely into all things sports. I was a national level swimmer kind of at a young age and just absolutely loved the individual competition and all of it. Had a very kind of traditional childhood. And it was, I guess, really until I went off to college that, I kind of left small town Maryland and I went to undergrad at Dartmouth. And there I just had always been fascinated in just human behavior. What makes us tick? I actually remember being in Sunday school, like asking all these very deep questions at a young age. And so I found kind of a path to that in college in psychology. And so really studying neuroscience and human behavior and why do humans make the decisions that they do? And so that was really kind of my journey there. And
Were you a psychology major?
yeah, I was.
Yeah. Our oldest daughter, Rachel, is a triple major in two-line business psychology and creative writing.
Oh, wow.
She loves Adam Grant and Mel Robbins and everything psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too when you look back at the trajectory of where we are now, and then you see these little points that connect all the dots. One of the experiences that I had when I was in college, I actually worked at the Tech School of Business in a research lab there. And the research lab was specifically doing health messaging claims and how claims actually impact health behaviors, which essentially was a lot of the early placebo work. And so it's interesting now to see how that early work now transcends, right, what we're doing now.
Cool.
So background in psychology, I was super interested, like I said, in human behavior. And then I went into the business world. So I was in management consulting for over 5 years, a lot of Fortune 150 growth strategy work, and then transitioned into all things health and healthcare. I had gone through kind of a personal, I'm going to say autoimmune kind of illness over the years that led to a lot of stomach discomfort and things like that. And I went to every single doctor, had ultrasounds, all the things that you could think of. And I actually came across just nutrition as a path for healing. And so I did this very deep protocol and essentially reversed the condition, and I no longer had it. And so,
You and Jason Card.
yeah, so we have a
both had that
similar,
same awakening.
we have a similar link in that way. And that moment was really big for me in my journey, because it really opened up this path to health and just how powerful it is for not only the food we eat, but also our thoughts and our minds and everything we really, surround ourselves in our environment. And so that's when my passion for health really took off in a new way. And I ended up going back to grad school, and I did a joint program at Yale with the School of Public Health and the School of Public Business, focused on chronic disease epidemiology, a lot with nutrition, and then also health policy. And I just became incredibly passionate about how can we actually shift health outcomes. I had done a lot of work in the health insurance space when I was in consulting, and I was just like, there's so many opportunities here to shift population health if we really focused on the core root cause drivers that are causing illness. And so then I spent a lot of time in DC, so over 5 years as the chief of staff at a think tank, really at the intersection of public policy, work with the White House, and a lot of large national corporations, particularly as CPG.
Yeah.
And the goal there was really, how can we find the middle ground between everyone to really shift population health forward? Developing a lot of business cases for how can we actually improve not only the health of the population, but also businesses? Can we find that middle ground? And middle ground in DC is not something that happens a lot.
Right.
So it was an interesting journey and learned a ton on the policy side. But after kind of looking at everything at a macro level, and then also just seeing, quite frankly, the DC environment and how intense lobbying was and how that would shift a lot of initiatives that had a lot of traction, I wanted to start to get involved with things really on the ground up. And so that's when I shifted over to really fully health tech entrepreneurship. And I've spent the last 8+ years working with a lot of startups in the health tech space. And then that's eventually led to all the work we're now doing at Evolve. And I always say that's kind of the, a little bit of the early childhood and professional trajectory, but a huge part of this has been the last 10 years. Big catalyst was when my dad actually passed away from brain cancer. And that just really started my consciousness and spiritual journey as well. My entry into everything was actually through quantum physics. When my dad passed away,
One of my favorite subjects right now.
I started to ask the questions like, where do we go? What happens?
Right.
Like, he's no longer here. And it just really kind of opened up my field. And I started to read all these books on quantum physics. And because, my background was in science, I had a very analytical mind at that point in time. I dove in and I was just like, oh, all of this is possible.
Yeah.
And I always say, study quantum physics for 2 days and you'll realize the nature of this reality.
Yeah. Became much more spiritual as a result of actually inventing a lot of quantum physics.
Yeah.
And Einstein too had this
Absolutely.
real difficult kind of reconciliation where he's like, eventually I choose materialism, but he could not reconcile like why quantum entanglement was possible. But it was interesting that we weren't able to prove it with scientific instrumentation until after he passed away. But he knew the math.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that really just started a journey of all different levels of discovery, from becoming a meditation teacher, training in Kundalini yoga meditation, psyche, and the just impact of our beliefs. And then also just training and learning in so many different lineages, similar to how it sounds like you're such an avid reader and articles and all the things. I just love to dive in. So dove into all the religious texts and, so many different types of trainings and modalities and all of it for many years, and did a lot
Have you read the Tao Te Ching?
I have.
Yeah. I just read that for the first time. And now I'm reading another book, which is another interpretation of it and how to embody it. And it's just kind of mind blowing that it's all in there.
It is
2,500 years old.
Yeah.
And I also recently read the Bhagavad Gita,
Mm-hmm.
which is also profound. The only part, I was meeting with an Indian American friend yesterday. The only part I reject of that is the caste system.
Yeah.
With me on that.
Yeah.
But so many divine messages in there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the magical thing about all that is you read all these texts and then you start to see what are the universal truths. And it's like, we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the perspective that's great from really diving.
I did know that because I had done enough analysis to know all the synchronicity between ancient spirituality, but I never actually read it in full.
Got it.
And reading it in full is different.
Yeah,
Mm.
It's really
absolutely.
cool.
Absolutely. And so it's just been a lot of just deep discovery into all that, but then also implementation and practice. And I think because a lot of my early background in psychology and human behavior change, I took all of that and I started reading it. And I just started applying it in my life, right? And testing and experimenting and seeing like how do all these things actually play out. And I think what you were saying before around embodiment, I think that's just been the biggest part of that journey that really started with learning and books and really even in an analytical aspect. It has really transitioned over the years, and particularly the last, I'd say 2 or 3, to just deeply embodying all those practices. And I think that's, such a big part of the journey is we can't just learn it. We actually have to apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to live it.
Yeah.
In the Tao, it would be like you have to walk the way.
Exactly. For the way to
And,
appear.
but any religion, like, Christianity, walk in God's grace, et cetera. I mean, it's all the same thing. And when you really embrace that, it is true that the synchronicities just start showing up. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in this episode, because, oh my gosh, the synchronicities between us have been mind blowing. Did you ever read the book Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson?
I have
Love
read that
that
as
book.
well.
That book has helped me really get back in tune with my mom and dad's soul. And I've been really enjoying like having conversations on long hikes and it doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, it's really profound. And that book is amazing. I literally wept every chapter in the book because the way she reads it.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, she's got the most beautiful voice. That one is amazing on Audible.
Yeah, there's so many profound stories in that one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, Jon,
Yeah. Well, I guess, similar to Lauren, I also grew up in a small town, but I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a small town in Iowa and, had, I'd say a somewhat average childhood, a fair amount of struggles and different things like that, I think had a lot of influence on me later on, now that I can reflect back on what took place back then. And also similar to Lauren, I tended to focus my direction and all my energy into sports and athletics, and also was very just fascinated with engineering and physics as a young kid. I can't tell you how many days I spent in my closet building Legos and rebuilding Legos and rebuilding Legos.
Right.
And also was very fortunate. My mom was an artist, and she also did crafts and stuff like that. And so like at the young age of like 5, like I was able to kind of go work for her and kind of learn from her like this entrepreneurial spirit of like creating things and selling things. And
I didn't realize we had that in common. I mean, my parents were entrepreneurs from the time I was.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
my mom learned how to program with me at age 7.
Oh, wow.
And that was the biggest gift of all. The biggest gift of all was that she realized that was my core calling and let me do it obsessively for the rest of my childhood. She did not force me to do anything else. She just let me be in this flow.
Wow, that's special.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and so I was always down there on the bandsaw or the table saw at the young age of 5, right? Like, and so I still have all my fingers.
Right? So you were producing physical items.
Yeah, so I would make like physical items. I would make my own wooden toy sets, and I would take them to the craft shows and stuff like that, and like I could sell them, and I would always want to be the cashier and kind of help with the transactions and help with answering questions and stuff like that. And so yeah, it was a really memorable time that had a lot of influence on me growing up. Yeah, I really enjoyed sports and athletics and just kind of driving my passion towards that. And
what did you play?
I did football and track, and then I also did baseball and basketball like when a younger age. But then in high school, I just focused on football and track. Yeah, I kind of went through some tough experiences with learning how college football worked at that level. My senior year in high school, I shattered my left ankle. Yeah, my foot was actually facing backwards. So when I went down to look at it and my shoe was facing the other way, I
dislocated this knee in basketball one time where my whole body went this way and the leg went that way.
Oh,
that was the most pain I think I've actually been in. I mean, it's really bad.
Yeah, I don't really remember much pain with it, which was really an interesting reflection, right? And
the problem was that nothing tore. So my entire quadricep went with my knee, and it was stuck behind, and so I was trying to fire back.
Get it back.
And it was bad. But anyways, there was there was a little bit of trauma with that.
Oh, I bet.
It got back,
Yeah.
like I had to go in, they'd pop it back in.
Oh, wow. So you had to
I
wait
was in
until
a
you
brace
got...
for a long time.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then when it came off, this leg was like the size of this.
Yeah.
I called the muscle John.
You have to do a lot of rehab and
Lot of
all
rehab,
that stuff.
yeah.
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 Yeah. It's, yeah. Well, it's important to do all the rehab though, right?
Of course.
Yeah. But yeah. And so, yeah. And so with that, unfortunately I'd lost some scholarships that I had to play, at the Division I level. But luckily, one of the head coaches was also, or one of the assistant coordinators that was recruiting me also went to be a head coach at a school called Western Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Or early that spring, he offered for me to come do a tryout. And so I still went and tried out, and I was rehabbing like crazy and doing all of this stuff to kind of get ready because I still wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he, did a tryout, and he offered me a full scholarship there on the spot. And so I signed as fast as I possibly could before anything else could happen, and so decided to go there and play football. And I studied engineering, still very passionate in all forms of engineering, the science of engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. Also studied a lot of physics and robotics classes and stuff like that there.
Even then they had robotics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Initial robotics. Yeah. Yeah.
Where were you at school?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Where were you at school?
It was Western Illinois University.
Okay. Western Illinois.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had very small
That's cool that
robotics lab.
That amount of sophistication at a little college, like, it's unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. It was great. Yeah. And then, going into my senior year in college, actually blew out my right knee.
Mm.
And I think after that, I kind of took it as like maybe a sign. It was like, okay, all right, I should use my brain more and like focus my energy in another direction. And so that's what I did. And I just, got just fascinated with business and just like how corporate companies were built, how companies were ran. I got fascinated with like all the, advanced forms of technology and like what was out there and like what could we do with things. And I just loved building things. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was what really just lights me up. And so went in and, started working with a company and, got to, worked my way up and promoted several times and got to see all facets of the company, and then decided, it was time for me to kind of leave and go work in another space. And so I went to the data center space. I was fascinated with cloud computing and data centers and like how they were built. And I saw that like, well, we're going to need to build more robust types of data centers to really, help harness all of this data and all of this computing power that's needed to support everything. So I did that for a few years. Was actually that company, we got acquired by a fairly large Fortune 150 company, and was able to run integration like for all North America into there. And so really kind of learned that transactional piece as well. And then actually went into their M&A side of their house for a couple of years, which was great.
And this was Meta, right?
No, this was at Emerson Electric.
Oh, okay.
So Emerson Network Power was
gotcha.
the division that acquired.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that came later. And then through that, was actually able to kind of build my first startup inside of this company, which was great, right? Like we were acquiring all these assets, but we weren't using everything. So we were kind of cherry picking technologies. And, I came up, with this pitch to be able to kind of bolt these other assets together to focus on like, electronic medical records for data center storage, and then also IT infrastructures for healthcare. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to kind of build a business unit there from that, which, was just a ton of fun.
Yeah.
From that went to work with, some high net worth individuals to kind of help consult on their portfolio companies and do some stuff like that to kind of find the next company that I really wanted to, be involved with and to take over. And, and that was a technology that spun out from NC State University. It was a thin film optics technology, which was just absolutely fascinating. The company was called Imagine Optics. And, really from like 2015 to 2021 was just like this all out sprint of like, okay, how can we commercialize this technology? We quickly found that, working in AR and VR was a huge opportunity. Working in flat panel displays was a huge opportunity, and a whole bunch of other sensory aspects. Yeah. And so, built manufacturing, did all of these things, raised a bunch of capital, and then eventually exited that company to Meta.
Okay.
So that was the company we sold to Meta. And so then that
And that's their optics today.
Yep, that technology is being used in like the Orion glasses that Mark wears, and then it'll also be used in all of their AR, VR equipment moving forward. Yeah, and then also during that time, I was offered, to be a key man in that acquisition, and it was a great opportunity. But I kind of had this other opportunity that I really wanted to be part of, and that was, building Evolve. And so I, respectfully, turned that down, was able to still leave on good terms. The acquisition still went through, like everything happened.
Yeah.
But it gave me the opportunity to really kind of focus on what we're building to.
If people can truly respect how difficult of a decision that is. I mean, a lot of people are surprised that, with my company, Data.World, which was acquired on 7/7, that I did not end up going there. And I have nothing but respect for ServiceNow. I think that they're an amazing company. I mean, they're certainly super stable, 10 billion in cash on the balance sheet, 30,000 employees, fastest company outside of Salesforce to get to 10 billion of AR until, by the way, OpenAI came along.
Okay.
Now it's out. Now the fastest. They're faster than Salesforce on that. They're, I think, 12 or 13 billion of AR right now.
Yeah.
And right now, as we're recording this, I think this is the 1,016th day since the launch of ChatGPT today.
Wow.
That's how short of amount of time. It's not even 3 years.
That's wild.
Now think about that. It'll be November 30th of this year, where it's 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. Like the kind of acceleration that's
amazing. Well, and that's the times right now, right? I mean, that's just where technology's at. Like, everything is accelerating that fast. And
so let's talk about how you guys met, like before we really jump into Evolve, because actually, you probably don't know this, but I started my first several companies at the beginning with my wife, Debra, which was amazing. I mean, she is so talented, and that there's no way I'd be sitting in front of you guys today without having that strong marriage from really the beginning of my entrepreneurial. When we got married, I had $1,000 and she had $2,000, and I joke with people that I married the wealthier woman. But how did you guys meet?
Yeah. So, well, do you want to share it or do you want me to?
Fine.
Yeah, I'll share it. I was just finishing up business school, and Lauren was just finishing up her undergrad, and we were both on vacations with a group of our friends. And I mean, we were in the Caribbean, and it was just, we just kind of met, and I don't know, I think just kind of instantly knew something was special and different. And then I think the real, coincidence piece that really solidified that was, after we met and we hung out for this week period of time, like we had both actually flown out of the same airport versus all of our other friends flew out of Miami airport. We flew out of Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
And we were just kind of, I don't know, a separate,
we didn't
know that each other were there. And all of a sudden, like I turn around and I'm looking at signs, and apparently she was doing the same things, and our backs just like bumped right up into each other.
That is so
And
cool.
we turned around and I'm just like, are you following me? It's just
I said, while I weep.
you following me? Right. And then ever since then, we've talked every single day.
Wow.
And that happened in 2007, March of 2007.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story that I haven't told on this podcast, but it's one that told me for sure that I married my soulmate. So when I was a teenage boy, this is going to sound like a teenage boy story, but it's true. I had this recurring dream probably 8 to 10 times, where I was on a beach, and this beautiful woman was walking up to me from the ocean and walking on sand. And it just continued to recur, and it was the same woman. And I didn't really know what it meant, but it was like amazing. And when Debra and I were on our honeymoon, we were in Greece. It was the first time we'd ever been outside of North America. And we hiked up to this beach. We hiked over these cliffs to this beach. We're in this small city. We're really just town called Madla in Crete. And when we got to the other side, there are these huge cliffs on each side. It looked like where Odysseus would have like shown up or something. I mean, it was just beautiful. There were caves, ancient caves there, and very remote, but very, very cool. Maybe 16 people on the beach, not commercial at all. Actually, there was this caveman looking guy, literally looked like a caveman, with dark leather skin, long hair, beard. He lived there in one of the caves. He was a entrepreneur that rented out this is his own little business there, rented out the umbrellas. And so I kind of like fell a little bit asleep on the beach, and I woke up in that half kind of groggy state, where it's almost like a little bit like a dream state. And Debra was walking up to me, and it all rushed back.
Whoa.
And I was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was like, I had forgotten about the dream actually, because it was about 8 to 10 years after those dreams stopped. And I was like, you're not going to believe this, but you really are the one. Like, I dreamed you over and over again. Like, it was literally that exact scene.
Wow.
And it's one of those moments where, I definitely had believed in God and, would consider myself somewhat spiritual, but, wasn't regularly going to, practice. But it was one of those moments that I look back on, and I actually relive this moment in a psychedelic journey, as another like sign of, you're married to your soulmate. Like that was real, and that was us showing you what the future would be. But we have free will, and you have to make that decision. And there's lots of things that actually Journey of Souls, which I finished. I don't know if have you read that book? Michael Newton, amazing book. I mean, very, very advanced book. I would not recommend it to people watching this unless they've read lots of books on spirituality, because it's so far out there that if you don't have a basis foundation, you're going to just think it's kind of crazy. But if you have the basis foundation, then it's a very, very good book to read. But one of the things you learn from that book is there's all these markers that are placed before you incarnate, that you have the free will on whether or not you're going to choose them. And, I chose right. Let's put it this way. But when you guys bumped into each other like that, you could have made a different decision. What got you guys to know? Like, what was the spark that made you?
Well, we were living in different places at that point. Well, I was in Manhattan and Jon was in Illinois. And so we just, stayed in touch. We visited, we were long distance, I think, for like the first year. And then my firm that I work for also had offices in Chicago. And so we were like, okay, well, if this is going to work, let's see. And so we both moved to Chicago. And so then, got to spend more time together there for a couple of years. And then after that, it was off to grad school. I think we got engaged probably 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah.
And then, and then we've lived a lot of places actually. From New York to Chicago to Connecticut to North Carolina. I mean, we've actually moved quite a bit. We're trying to stay put now in Austin for a while.
Wow.
Well, one of the things that was so cool when you guys first pitched us on Evolve, to me at least, was how Jon talked about you. Like, I remember him talking about you as just, this photographic memory and with so much love and so much respect. So it's really cool you guys work together, and really cool you guys found each other. That I don't believe in coincidences. And that was the ultimate non-coincidence, because what would be the probability you'd be in an airport like that and you'd back up to each other and bump into each other?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and then if you look at, just the skill sets that she has and embodies, and like, we both have the foundational aspect, that's very aligned, right? We're very grounded in that. But then you look at like what, her skill sets are, as like far as, her purpose and that, and then kind of bringing mine into effect, right? And that really kind of combining those two things really helps to kind of fill out, a bigger picture strategic aspect from like how we created Evolve.
So let's dive into Evolve. Tell me about it. I don't want to try to steal the words out of your mouth on this one. I know a lot about it, but the demo that happened in this room literally blew my mind, and Debra's mind too.
Yeah, I think, maybe I'll just kind of start with just a snippet on, what set the foundation for us on it, right?
Yeah.
And it was, as Lauren mentioned, kind of getting deep into quantum physics and spirituality, and we shared that experience together. So like, we spent, you know, I don't know, at least the last 10 years, like that's what we did on our spare time. Like
Right.
we would read books, we would have these discussions, we would talk about these things. And it was so awesome to be able to do that, with her.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course,
Versus,
yeah.
somebody else that I didn't live with and spend every other moment with. Right. Because we
Right.
would just do that all the time. So it was great. And then, but it was during the time, like when I was, building Imagine Optics and like we were, deep in that phase of scaling manufacturing and getting manufacturing equipment in and trying to figure that stuff out, we also started to kind of look at a deeper spiritual journey
Mhm.
and like really kind of try to understand more of like, the meanings behind things or try to connect these dots and everything. And it was, really, working with a group of people like one weekend in very deep meditative practices that kind of allowed this download per se to come in.
Mhm.
And it was just kind of like showing me kind of like this visual. It was like just a very vivid, the realest thing I've ever experienced of like, being guided and shown these different aspects of my life and like how they were kind of being compiled to reach this state.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then what these technologies are that are being created out there and like how they need to be kind of combined to help heal humanity.
Yeah.
And so, that was in 2018, I think. And so kind of bringing that forward, it just kept sitting with it and sitting with it and like thinking about it and like seeing the visuals of this headset and like how we can actually do this. And I was also very, immersed in VR and AR at that time and like understanding what all the most technical challenges were and like how that market was really doing and like seeing the direction that AR and VR were going as far as creating, the metaverse and gaming and, some moderate spatial computing at that time early on.
Yeah.
And then overlaying it with like the quantum physics aspect of like understanding that like everything's energy. Our
Mhm.
biology is all driven through electrical and magnetic frequencies,
Yeah.
right? But and now today, like we can measure all of that stuff,
Mhm.
right? Like sensors are small enough and precise enough and compact enough and cheap enough and scalable from a manufacturing standpoint to really be able to do that. And then you look at like VR and like VR is amazing from the standpoint of being able to provide you into a very immersive setting that you can at times lose an understanding of like what's real and what's not real. Like it can actually help, the subconscious understand like what's going on. Right. And so like I think VR has a huge important play in like helping humanity kind of get back going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so at Evolve is really like this combination of this ability to read the bioelectromagnetic field of the body eventually and provide a very immersive experience to help reprogram the subconscious. And so, in this state that humanity's in today, unfortunately, we're in a very dysregulated state,
Mhm.
right? And I think the dysregulation really stems from kind of three primary categories of factors, right? Like it's the food
Mhm.
that's not really food anymore,
You know,
as genetically modified as it is, and like all of this other stuff. And
Jason Karp's whole mission in life.
exactly, Jason's Karp's whole thing, and Lauren spent a lot of time in that space too. And then you have your environment, right? I mean, our environment, like we're surrounded by what, like 86,000 synthetic chemicals on a daily basis, right? I mean, just between like all the materials and all the textiles and all the stuff that's being made and like that getting absorbed into our skin or even our clothes that we're wearing.
Mhm.
And then you have the third piece, which has really spun up just in the last couple decades, and that's technology.
Mhm.
I mean, you look at like how technology has been developed today, what are its currently use cases and like how it affects us biologically, right? Or, in our physiology, right? And, I mean, those algorithms are made to kind of keep you going and going and going. And yeah, it's
For
good
sure.
from one standpoint of like
Yeah.
education and like being connected like at a virtual level, but it's also creating all these artificial states in our brains and like in our bodies that causes this dysregulation. And ultimately, like our human biology can't keep up and detox all of
Mhm.
that fast enough. Like we have not evolved fast enough to be able to process the GMO food, to be able to deal with the synthetics in our environment, and to be able to deal with all these kind of manipulated chemical imbalances that get created.
It is a deliberate manipulation, and it is something I'm addressing in the book I'm writing, which is also called Love Conquers Fear, but the subtitle is Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. And it bothers me a lot because it's Jason Karp and I talked about this quite a bit, that it's an algorithmic manipulation to hijack our amygdala.
Yeah.
And it really it is based that way, and by it I'm talking about social media, I'm talking about the regular media. I'm a big fan of the free press, so I think the free press is fundamental to democracy. But I'm not a fan of the algorithms, the engagement that drives advertising. Because that algorithmically, if you unleash machine learning, it's going to goal seek. And it's just doing what it's supposed to do mathematically. It's not like a machine learning is like a dark force. It just is goal seeking to an outcome, a mathematical outcome. And that mathematical outcome is drive maximum engagement to drive maximum advertising revenue. And you probably know this, but it's kind of the scale of these numbers are just amazing. Meta made $45 billion in cash last quarter. And Zuckerberg was just at the White House for that big tech dinner and pledged that they're going to spend at least $600 billion by 2028 on AI, systems and data centers. I mean, one of them the size literally of Manhattan. It's just like the scale of the level of spending here is just beyond. And, one thing that they're doing that I really like is Llama is at least open source. I think that's a good thing for the world. I think it's better for the world if AI is something that becomes widely accessible to humanity as opposed to just the elite few. And open source is the gateway for that. Our youngest daughter has 5 open source models running on her computer here. And it's amazing what you can prompt them and ask them for. Some of it's a little bit shocking, actually, because they're open source, so they don't have the same governors that these closed source, kind of frontier models have, which is a problem. But I don't want to diverge too much. But the scale here is incredible of what it kind of feeds. There's that movie that I love, that movie called Thank You for Smoking, and it's a drama about a guy that works in the cigarette industry. Not a piece of nonfiction work, but it's based on, real life. And he works in the cigarette industry, and he's like rationalizing it with someone. And he's like, look, hey, everybody's got to pay their mortgage. And that's like his whole basis, for his life. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there watching this that feel like that. And I understand, scarcity will breed a trade-off, and you've got to have food, water, shelter, etc. But this algorithmic manipulation is a real problem because you can really get whipsawed. And part of what you realize if you go on a spiritual journey is that part of becoming more spiritual means that you're deprogramming yourself. If you're just constantly programmed by dystopian news, dystopian social media, et cetera, just being pushed to you, just this onslaught, then you can get extremely stressed. You could walk around extremely distrustful of society and think that we live in a hell day, versus the fact that in a world of 8.2 billion people, it's largely a beautiful reality. And there's acts of love and beauty happening every day. There is a murder happening every day and with 8.2 billion people. But and that's horrible, right? There's no excuse for that. But ultimately, the vast majority of humanity is beautiful, and news by definition is an exception. So it's, gotta wake up and evolve as part of the way of waking up.
And I was going to say, we're really trying to tackle so many of those challenges we just talked about, right? So we have this VR biosensing headset, right? The headset itself, and it's essentially reading your physiology, and so has a multitude of sensors from EEG to EDA to IMU, eye tracking, capturing a lot of data within one session. And I can let Jon maybe talk a little bit more about the technology and the hardware. It's really his
And I just
passion and
want to say,
baby.
like,
Yeah.
for anybody watching this, like, that actually experiencing it and going into that deep
Yeah.
meditative state is so cool.
Hmm.
I mean, it really is like a window into the future of how little we actually understand about the brain today, and how much better society would be if everybody could get into that state
Yep.
of
Yeah.
understanding the oneness and the beauty of all things and the beautiful reality we live in.
Yeah.
Um,
And
it
that's
would just be amazing.
and that's really our goal, is to open up an opportunity to like train all the things that we're talking about. I think to mitigate a lot of the challenges that we're facing. And so one of the simplest ways that we talk about it from a training perspective is we're really tackling the 3 A's, which is arousal. So that's that safety and security, right, within my body, tackling a lot of things around scarcity and the programming. It's attention. So where we place our attention is where we create our reality. And just like you're talking about, like with the perceptions around the point of view that we're seeing the world, right? Are we headed to dystopia? Are we headed to heaven on earth, right? And so our attention and focus, is it on the news, or is it on, right, creating abundance in our lives? And so how do we actually focus? And one of the very interesting things and stats just related to technology is just our attention span just continues to drop significantly,
Yeah.
particularly in kids.
Yeah.
And so attention is a big part of it. Where are we placing our focus? And then the second piece is awareness. And so unless you have awareness, it's impossible to shift your programming and behavior, right? And so not only awareness from, am I consciously aware of what's happening and not operating from unconscious programs, but then also awareness and how can I access these higher states, as well.
Listen to Awareness by Anthony DeMello.
I have it.
Oh, man. I actually found a book you haven't read.
Okay.
This is amazing. This is the first Jon.
Yeah, I haven't heard that before.
Yeah. This one was recommended to me by Taro, who is the founder of Four Sigmatic. But he lives here in Austin.
We have this.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm like a big
great.
fan. I use Four Sigmatic products in all my smoothie. I don't have any advertising or sponsors on this podcast. It's just me being authentic. But it's a great product. But he went on his own soul quest and read over 130 books, and he said that was his favorite.
Oh,
It's really, and the fun thing about it is on Audible, Anthony DeMello is like the George Carlin of spiritual teachers.
Okay.
They're like laughing out loud while like you're really learning, but the whole thing's about waking up and creating awareness. And that if you have full awareness, then even if you're suffering from anything, a past trauma or anything else, if you have full awareness of why, then it will go away. That you actually have to do the deep work to actually understand the source of the trauma.
Yeah. And I think on to that, I mean, doing the work, that's what we all eventually understand that we need to do.
Yes.
And then what we end up doing is we rationalize with ourselves, right? Because we can negotiate anything with ourselves.
Yeah.
We rationalize with ourselves the value of our time to do that work. And then we associate, okay, well, how much time is it going to take me in order to do this work? And like, what kind of outcome am I going to get? And like, what kind of milestones, and like all these other things. And I think that's where a lot of people tend to get lost in doing the work, because they get discouraged. They don't know if they're making progress.
Yeah.
They don't know if they're doing it right. There's no playbook, right? Because we're all individual and we're all different. And I think that's, part of what we're trying to solve for at Evolve, is that because everybody's different, like we can't just do, we have a hard time justifying spending a lot of time doing meditations like every day, right? And we don't know which meditation to do and like all of that stuff. And so we want to be able to help guide the individual, right, through our headset, right? Because we can read what's going on internally. So we know exactly where everything's at. So if you kind of think about like how noise canceling headphones work, like for a very simplistic example, right? They take an external frequency and they create an isolation barrier to stop that frequency from going into the headphones further. So then you can hear your sound really good. Like we're kind of doing the opposite of that. We're taking the internal frequency, we're understanding what it means, and then we're providing and other auditory or visual frequency to help guide the body into a natural state of alignment. And to help do the brain shifting, help train that individual to get out of the high beta, which is where they live when they're fight or flight and go, go, go. And we tend to always be stuck there. And when you're just stuck in a dominant brainwave state, you're only producing chemicals associated with that brainwave state. So then it becomes this compounding effect on the rest of the body. Then everything else is saying, okay, I got to be ready to go. I got to be ready to do this, and like always on, and I can't turn it off and shut it off. And so, but what we're able to do is to kind of help guide that individual and train them like a personal trainer would, to get out of the beta, high beta, and into alpha and into theta, right? So then they produce chemicals associated with that, but then they can also reach different states of meditation and practice, right? Because it kind of condenses, we talk about, we joke about collapsing time. Like, how can we help collapse time for individuals? Well, if we created the most perfect program that's fully optimized to meet you, Brett, like right where you are at this moment in time, like that would help collapse time for you, right? Because every moment, like our bodies are these super microorganisms constantly changing. And so like, how do you create a protocol or a program for somebody to make change based on the past? Because it's always based on the past unless you're doing it in real time. And so like everything that we're doing in our headset is all in real time, right? So we collect 1 million points of biometric data on you every minute across all 8 of these sensors, right? We're reading the brain, the heart, the nervous system, your eyes, all of this stuff. And then our AI engine understands and interprets what those data points mean. And then once we have that understanding of what that means, it gets then sent into the machine learning algorithm that then allows it to adjust the protocol to optimize it for you, to then meet you where you are. And then it's this closed loop session of it. It's it's constantly learning on itself.
So cool.
And it's just this flywheel. And I think, one other point to just kind of, that was like this aha moment for us back, several years ago before we created Evolve was, we talked about this desire for us to really want to focus more on human-centered technology. And I think that's where there's this differentiator between kind of how some technology is being developed and how it's being used and how it's being monetized and how it's being directed. And then we have this other approach that we're really trying to focus on. And that's like, well, how do we, we have, I don't know where my phone's at, but like we have these supercomputers in our pockets, right? Like it's wild, like how much I can do right there, right? Like, oh my God, like mind blowing to think about, right? But at the same time, humanity on this hand has never been sicker. Like, how is that possible? Like what's going on? Like
depression and loneliness.
Why can't we bring those two together? And so like, that's what we're really focused on, like this huge humanitarian push. And like, we don't want to do it alone. Like we want to find other companies. And like part of this journey has been amazing because we've been able to find other entrepreneurs who are doing the similar thing, or doing their piece to that puzzle. And like, we're working together. Like I'm sharing supply chain connections with them, or I'm giving them advice on this and they're giving me advice on that. Right. And like, we're really trying to work together so that we can collectively like help humanity elevate consciousness.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. One of the people that I was very proud to introduce you guys to is Dr. Ellen Langer. Mother of mindfulness.
Yes.
And I just had such a great connection with her when I spoke at that gathering at MIT. It was a gathering of 50 CEOs, and she and I we had that soul level connection. Yeah. Hopefully something comes out of that, but I knew that you guys should meet for sure. So in terms of, I don't know how much you want to explain this for the product, because I know that, still kind of stealth, et cetera, but do you want to explain like exactly what people see visually and kind of how it works, or do you not want to?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about it.
Because I'm kind of like biting my tongue because I want to, talk about that.
Yeah.
But really you guys talk about that. But just the actual process of going through the demo was like very moving to me. And I know Mark Gober felt that way and Debra felt that way. So I think it'd be cool for people to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the main things, obviously, as we, went through is what a very technical and very complicated process to just build the headset, right? To be able to fit everything on the same board, to be able to have all the sensors working. and really just tackle a lot of the challenges that are in the industry just around signal quality. Because ultimately we knew before we even got to creating these beautiful scenes in VR, which we've gotten to, and having everything kind of work together, everything really relies on how accurate is the data and the quality of the signal. So that was really just a huge part of our initial journey. And so when you think about kind of the process that what's happening within the headset on the back end is essentially we have all these sensors, they're capturing the signal. The signal is then, translated into a metric. So something like, we have a PPG sensor that, now we're capturing heart rate, and then heart rate becomes a specific metric.
PPG stands for what?
Photocephalometry.
I'm
always the worst.
Okay, I'm
Can
still,
you say
I'm saying no. I'm actually no better off. Like I probably should have
it's probably like it's like 32 letters or something.
Right.
It's the longest word ever.
Right.
So the PPG.
But the point is, you have lots of sensors.
Lots of sensors, and that sensor captures heart rate, which then is translated into a metric, and then we use that metric to actually drive the scene, right? And so it's kind of this process of sensor to signal to metric to now we're driving real-time biofeedback. And so the real innovation that we've done that no one else really has is like, yes, biofeedback exists in the essence of I can capture my heart rate and I can see it's X, or I can see my coherence score, is a particular number. And I can see that kind of live in the session, but it's just a reflection. It's a number.
Right.
And so what we've really done and kind of the innovation we created is to say, okay, we're capturing this data. Now we have a metric, and we've used HRV coherence, which is just a algorithm that we've developed. It's currently proprietary, but it'll, hopefully over time we'll be able to go open source with it as well.
And HRV, and this means what?
Heart rate variability. And so heart rate variability. So it's
I thought I knew that, but I wanted the audience to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's familiar from HRV with the Oura Ring and the Whoop and all the other kind of consumer technology out there. But essentially coherence, which was a lot of that work was pioneered by HeartMath, is a really strong metric for looking at autonomic nervous system regulation, how stressed someone is, their emotional well-being. It's just kind of this really strong kind of macro measure to show like if someone is in a regulated nervous system state.
Yeah.
And so essentially what happens is we're capturing that metric for the individual. And then in VR, you're essentially in a scene, and all of our scenes are in nature. And a lot of them are actually at very cool, kind of ancient and mystical sites, around the world. And the one that you particularly demoed is a scene that is from the Isle of Skye in Scotland. It's actually called Fairy Glen, and it's this kind of beautiful landscape with mountains. And in the middle is actually a labyrinth that's been created with rocks. And so what happens is while you're in the scene, the rocks essentially gently lift up from the ground as your coherence score increases. And so what the visual environment is essentially doing is it's giving you feedback in real time as to how your physiology is performing, right? And not in a performing as in, this is right or this is bad or, there's any direction. It's just giving you feedback as to whether or not your coherence score is increasing or it's going down.
Yeah, I can tell you that it did not at all. Like there wasn't like a level of stress when like
it's
trying
very
to beat
subtle.
some scores, like really. Yeah.
It's very subtle, and it's all based a lot actually on the principles that have been used in neurofeedback and just in lots of other biofeedback training kind of over time, which is an operant conditioning. And essentially an operant conditioning is that I am seeing a feedback, I'm learning yes or no, and then my body says, okay, this is the state I want to continue and continue and continue in. You train that enough over time, neuroplasticity, and that becomes the new default state, right? And so in real time, this metric is actually guiding you and essentially training you, and the visuals are training you into this is the new, state that's going to be more optimal for my body. And whether I'm giving an example with, HRV and heart rate and coherence, but whether that's having more focus, whether, that's going into deeper meditative states and guiding people there. We actually do a lot with eyes closed as well to be able to access deeper meditative state. And so the other kind of piece Jon was talking about too there is just the level of personalization. Because everyone is just so different. Where your HRV is going to be completely different than someone else's. And so the other kind of big thing that we really wanted to innovate on and change is just everything else out there is really cookie cutter programs. And so, yes, it can adapt to the session in real time, but then your trajectory is going to be completely different than someone else, right? If your goal is to kind of get to a more regulated, optimal HRV, for you, that could be 10 sessions. For someone else, it could be 50. Right. And it's just taking someone on that trajectory at the right pace. And so they can really embody that new state.
Yeah.
And I think maybe just to add one other thing to that, I think one of the most, I've done hundreds of these demos with people and seeing how people light up in different certain ways. And like one of the, a few of the underlying things that they all collectively share with me is, one, they feel like they just love looking at their data, right? They love looking at their brainwave data and their heart rate data and their nervous system data and like all of this stuff, because it creates this felt experience that brings them back into their body. Right? Because we tend to living out here and like go and kind of outside of our body in more of an analytical way, then this kind of regrounds them with their body. And then now they have this, okay, wow, my body is capable of changing these things and doing these things. So then you create what's called like a felt experience.
Yeah.
Like a felt experience is really profound in order to help make change, right? It's like awareness, felt experience, and making the change and like reiterating, right? And the other piece that is really profound for people is being able to see like a measurable state change, right? So they're like, okay, well, I did this meditation with the headset and it shows you like, okay, you started here at this baseline and then you ended here. And so we showed that there's a physiological change that took place in 5 minutes that got you from here to here. And people are just like, oh, wow. So I was doing that meditation right, or that time was worth it that I spent doing it, because I now have a scientific way to validate that, okay, that was worth my time, because I said this change. And I also have a felt experience change, right? So it's kind of twofold, right? So it's like, I have it on paper in scientific way that people tend to gravitate more towards, right? Like I want to see the research, I want to see the support and the evidence. And then I also have this kind of felt experience.
Yeah.
And then I think the third one is really like on top of the felt experience, like so many people, like it's wild. So many people like immediately like kind of want to take a nap, or they start yawning profusely, right, during session, right? And it's because when we're balancing your nervous system and taking it out of fight or flight, so your autonomic nervous system comprises of two parts. The sympathetic nervous system, which is kind of stress, fight or flight, go, and your parasympathetic, which is more of like peace and restoration and recovery, right? And like you want them to be balanced, and you need them to be up and down for different times in order to do different things, but you don't always want them to be like, stuck in one position.
That's right.
And so when we're able to kind of shift that and balance that, the parasympathetic just takes over and that person just starts yawning and like wants to take a nap. And I've had several people take naps like right away, like in the middle of the afternoon. And they'd be like, I've never taken a nap at 4:30 in the afternoon before in 30 years. And what did you do? Like, what happened? Like, why did I have such a response? And I'm just like, oh, well, you've lived in this state for 30 years and your body's taking over, and saying, man, you got to just calm down. Like, let's relax for a little bit. Let me do my job, because our bodies, hands down, are the most advanced technology ever created.
Yes.
Like it's amazing what your body is capable of doing. But when we live in these dysregulated states all the time, then it's not capable to function in the way that it was built to do.
Yeah.
And that's where we're seeing all the mental health and chronic diseases and all the stuff that's kind of transpiring out, because it's not able to do what it needs to do.
I mean, in terms of like, it's so cool. And I remember John Mackey too was blown away with it, and the founder of Whole Foods.
Yeah.
In terms of like your understanding of spirituality and like going back in time and seeing the synchronicity between all the ancient spiritual tradition and how much we all have in common versus the man stuff. Like, do you think that, thousands of years ago, maybe even 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, like we're so much more advanced in this way of using our bodies,
definitely
using the technology that we're born with, that we, have been given from, the universe, God, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Again, I think that's fascinating. I mean, there's so many things that I was talking with one friend, and he was on the savannah, and there's this African tribe, and they're all in this circle, and they're able to actually conjure up and heal themselves with no medicines or anything, just like working together.
Yes.
And it's just, I think that's just fascinating. Like what power we have that we're not unlocking. Because again, this kind of constant manipulation machine that we find ourselves in, which is I'm a huge fan of capitalism. I mean, to be clear, I mean,
Mhm.
capitalism lifted a ton of people out of starvation and poverty. It's one of the greatest things humanity's ever invented.
Yeah.
It's like we have to be humble enough to rediscover the things that quite literally I think we beat out of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
early on. I
Oh,
mean,
totally.
there are examples of the church, early on, like literally saying that's taboo. There's examples of people early on, coming to, this country, other countries, and, really trying to call the other a savage without honoring like
Mm,
the fact that they actually knew more about how to regulate their body than, the Anglo-Saxon did, which is just kind of incredible
yeah.
Yeah.
to think about. So it's like you guys are rediscovering something that's been
Yeah.
around, but the cool thing about it is you're compressing time and collapsing time and allowing it to use the modern technology to give people there faster,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I kind of look at it like, we're building a bridge between science and mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
right? To help kind of remove the dogmatic views from the mysticism,
Yep.
right? Because like, breath work is the most ancient, rawest form of any psychedelic, right? Like you can put yourself into a psychedelic trance, like, but just by doing breath work,
That's right. Yeah.
right? Like no medicines, no anything, right? I mean, it's amazing, but all of it's been, somehow forgotten,
Mm-hmm.
right? And or not passed on like it should have been,
Mhm.
right? And so I think, and then the way that especially we live here in the Western world of wanting data, wanting validation, wanting proof, all of this stuff, I think it provides us, like it puts us in a unique position to be able to provide that, right? Because we can collect all of that at a medical grade science, clinical grade level, like with these sensors. And now we can do it from like in the comfort of your own home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without having a PhD in neuroscience.
Yeah.
Like you literally just put it on and it works and you see the results and it's amazing.
Because I felt the results. I mean, I do meditate, but I felt the results pretty quickly, and Debra did too.
Mhm.
And you feel it like while you're going into it. I mean, the voice speaking to you is very soothing. And you're seeing the rocks and that beautiful glen,
Yeah.
and you literally feel your body change.
Mhm.
And like you said, for some people, it makes them fall asleep. For me, it just made me feel completely relaxed and in the zone, and
Yeah.
just ready to take on the day with more heart, with a more heart forward approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, to your point around all these, ancient practices and things like that, is what we've really done. It's subtle because you're going into the experience and you're deep and it's immersive, right? So you're not knowing and seeing maybe all the nuances that are essentially incorporated in the experience.
Mhm.
I mean, that's essentially what we've done is we've taken all these ancient practices and lineages and all the things we know that help us to get into these states. And so nature is one of them. Like, and if you kind of look at like everything we've essentially included in each of the programs, each of them has a deep body of research within themselves. And then not only do we have kind of the multimodal sensor piece, but then we're creating this like multimodal behavioral intervention, right? In a way of like just going in VR and being in nature shows significant effect. Just being in this like soothing scene, right? That's like giving us this level of, remembrance, the audio, like all of it together, right? Just kind of creates this experience. And we talk all the time about, how what we're really doing, over time and at a ground level is creating a modern initiatic path, right? In a way of like, how do I start walking into learning these different skills? And it just starts so simply with the breath, but then eventually can walk up into accessing, higher states of consciousness, similar to one would do, in psychedelics. And it's like, what does that path look like? And how do I walk there? And how can we use technology to help enable someone to walk it, more
I
easily?
mean, one of my hopes is that, and I think we're going to get there, by the way. So I'll say that this hope, I think, will become a reality, is that, let's take Ibogaine, for example, which I do not feel called to do, right? I haven't had that kind of suffering in my life where I would need to do that. But treating it as so taboo refuses to understand how it works. Like, how does it work? Like why was there a plant that evolved where it's literally like a reset button for the brain. And, you know, at that talk at TED, you know, where it's the head of Stanford's Brain Research Center, you know, he said that through the studies, and I'm not sure you're going to know this much better than me, but it's either the gray matter or the white matter around the brain. But the one dose for these vets actually de-aged their brain by up to 5 years, and you can measure the actual matter around the brain. Is it gray or white matter?
In that
For the-
study? Oh,
For the brain. No, but what is the matter around their brain that they measure to see the age of your brain?
Oh, the gray matter.
The gray
Yeah.
matter, yeah. So it actually regrew that to the point where their brain de-aged by up to 5 years.
Huh.
Well, who watching this would not want their brain to de-age? Now, they'd be like, well, I really want to take something like Ibogaine to do it. But how does it work? Like, you know, once we decode how these things work, then it's possible that evolve other technologies like it will give you those benefits without the use of any medicines. And it's not like I'm anti psychedelics. I'm very pro psychedelics, but because of the technology that it provides, it is technology. I mean, everything at the end of the day is technology, because everything, like you said, is energy.
Yeah.
You know, our souls are technology, right? They're energy. You know, we're ultimately light being at our core, you know, and we're having a physical experience, you know, even though we're spiritual beings in the Earth School. And so, like, if we just didn't treat these things as taboo, you know, Copernicus was a heretic at the time, and the clergy at the time refused to look through his telescope. Like, they really ostracized him because he dared challenge that the Earth was the center of the universe.
Yeah.
He was like, no, actually, there's a vast universe, and so far, from what we know, it's just infinite. Like, maybe there is an edge. I would certainly like to know if there's an edge. Like let's conquer faster and light speed travel. Try to find out if there's a border somewhere. But you know, that's what I think is going to happen. I mean, the science fiction series that I wrote, you know, called The Lattice, is really exploring how it happens. And one of the things, it was actually inspired by you guys, and frankly, I'll be honest with you, it was inspired by a journey that I had a while back, where in that journey, part of what I saw that would help bring humanity back together is if you used a brain to computer interface and put it on the Dalai Lama, deep meditators, psychonauts, you know, people that are having, you know, near-death experience, et cetera. And then you uploaded all of that data to create an accurate picture of source, or heaven, or the astral plane, or the river of consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. And Dr. Alexander Bliss, who's the protagonist in the story, he does this. He has this crazy idea. People think he's just nuts to do this, to record all this data on all these people. But he looks for the commonality, which there's a lot of commonality. That's where the Lattice is discovered. And ultimately premieres it at this Telluride Film Festival. It's called the Mountain Film Festival. It's a real festival. I'm going to it next year, where documentaries are aired. One of my very good friends, who's going to be on this podcast, Michael Collins, is on their board, and he's a documentary filmmaker. He's making an amazing documentary right now called Intuition, which are these schools in India where they can teach these children actually how to navigate source, which is fantastic. No medicine, nothing. Just teach them, like, again, our God-given, you know, right, being born in these bodies and have this technology.
Raja yoga, I think, is what they teach.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so the documentary that's premiered in Telluride, in this fiction story, is so profound to everybody that it wakes humanity up collectively. And they're like, oh, wow, like, this is our reality. Because it's the same for the Dalai Lama, for deep meditators, for psychonauts, et cetera, that the same thing is shown in terms of the pattern. And I really do believe science and spirituality need to come back together. And you guys are an actual bridge to that. And meditation, there's a lot of this on the rise, because I do think that there is a consciousness awakening underway.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's, you know, would be hard to say it's not,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I think with, how many different meditation programs are coming out there today, like, humanity is waking up and they're looking for alternative ways to stop feeling the way that they currently feel.
Mhm.
And, that's part of like what good things like social media has brought, right? It's brought like this ability for them to learn
Mhm.
and for us to find alternative sources instead of just taking pills or medications or whatever it is. And now there's a place and time for all of that. Like, I'm not saying there's not, but I think that more of humanity is waking up to looking for non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical ways to feel better.
Right.
And I think part of it is this innate knowing that that people are starting to remember that their bodies are capable and their minds are capable of producing these things. I mean, we have a cellular pharmacy inside of us,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we can produce
I
any
love that term.
in-
That's
any
cellular farming.
any chemical that we've ever wanted, right? I mean, if somebody gets in a car accident, I mean, they're producing all sorts of stuff for pain, right? So then that person can stay, your cognitive, like, so they can manage whatever they need to be able to do. And so, I mean, it's been studied in multiple, like Dr. Joe Dispenza does a lot of work on that too.
That's true.
And
I know you're a fan of.
Yeah.
You're both fans.
yeah, I'm a very big.
Of Joe
We've been
Dispenza.
following Dr. Joe Dispenza.
He calls God
for,
the great intelligence of the quantum field,
Mhm.
but it's all the same thing.
It is all this. Yeah, it's a different, different name for.
I haven't been to one of his workshops yet, but I'm a fan of his books. Actually, John Mackey turned me on his books.
Oh yeah, they're great. They're great. We've been following him for over 10 years probably, and he's had a huge impact, right? And like what we're doing, and just like our beliefs, and like opening us up to think differently about certain things, and like combining physics and quantum physics with, everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
It's really,
It's my second time now to read the Tao Te Ching, but this is literally very recent overall. This part of my learning in terms of reading it at all. I first read it 2 weeks ago, and now it's my second time to read it with Wayne Dyer talking about each chapter. Yeah, he's great. And I can't remember the exact verse, but I think it's either 25 or 26. And I texted it to one of my closest friends, Lincoln Brown. And I texted it to Lincoln, and I'm like, this is actually Joe Dispenza. Like, just this one verse of the Tao is what Joe Dispenza is all about. And it's all about basically the power of your thoughts.
Yeah.
And one of the things that as I become more embodied spiritually, and my soul becomes more embodied in my physical vessel, is I'm very, very aware of my thoughts now. I'm very aware of, like, if they're negative or positive. Also, I mean, I should have known this even before, because I've studied Vedanta for years, and Vedanta is all about gaining control over your mind, leveraging your higher intellect to ultimately realize that your mind left ungoverned is like a child. It'll have lots of worries about the past, lots of anxieties about the future. You completely miss the present moment. So it's all about the practice of realizing that and developing that. But it's all in the Tao, actually. Like, it's like Joe Dispenza, it's literally in the Tao. I don't know if that was one of his influences or Vedanta was or whatever, but there's so many of these spiritual traditions which are change your mind, you change your reality.
Yeah, and you gave the example before of something like in the ancient cultures when people would be in groups and there would just be these magical healings, right, that essentially take place. And Dr. Joe, like, one of the main things he does at his workshops is they do actually coherence healings. And Lynn Taggart, who wrote The Power of Eight.
No, I haven't read that one.
Okay, so that's a good one, where she's done a lot of studies with Princeton, a number of top universities, where essentially they've taken groups of people and they hold a similar intention. So they're holding a similar thought, and it could be, a poverty-stricken area or somewhere that's war-torn. And so they focus their collective intent and thoughts on this particular area. And then they go and they actually do research to see, like, was there any effect in that region? So they've done dozens of studies at this point with reputable universities. And what she's found through her work is that the magic number is 8, that it's 8 people essentially with that same kind of collective thought and intention that is, driving these outcomes. And so then Dr. Joe's groups and a lot of what he's doing around coherence healing, it's a group of 8 or more, and there's a person kind of in the center. But what happens is they actually get the entire field of people into a state of heart coherence. which is similar to the metric, obviously, that we're using within our sessions. And what that does is essentially create kind of a field, right, of energy. And then that collective intent, in many cases, there's been so many case studies now, and he's doing a lot of research on it to show the effect, right, that can
I have a
happen.
friend who, him and his wife went together, and his wife was struggling from long COVID. And literally in one Joe Dispenza workshop, she's healed.
Yeah.
Like he's like, we've tried everything. And this is, people would be, I probably shouldn't mention who the name of the friend is because I haven't asked for permission to tell this story, but I think they'd be fine with it. But people would be shocked to realize how high profile this person is and how much ability they have to try everything biohacking wise.
Yeah.
And it was just one Joe Dispenza workshop. And you don't have to even go to a workshop. I mean, you could just read the books, practice it.
Yeah.
It's just the workshop kind of helps you in terms of I haven't been to one, but I've heard through you guys and others that it helps you learn from each other and practice together. And so it's just kind of like, it's like going to a meditation retreat. It just forces you
to take action.
To do an 8-hour meditation, right? Because like how often do we sit down to do 8-hour meditations?
Right. Yeah. I don't think we'll be using Evolve to do 8-hour the collapsing time. It'd be like, well, I bought this Evolve thing and now all I do is spend
the opposite.
I'm joking with you guys. So we touched on Joe Dispenza, and I want to tell a synchronicity story that really blew my mind. This year, actually, I went to Necker Island for the first time. I don't think it would be the last time, but it was amazing. It's the island that is owned by Richard Branson. It's only 74 acres. And my good friend, Alexander McCoben, who is the founder of Liberty Ventures and has different conferences. I'm actually speaking at one in New York City called the Principled Business Summit coming up in, I think that's mid-October. But, Alexander invited me and John Mackey and some other people to go on this retreat, meet Richard Branson, give different presentations. And I gave a presentation there on the hard problem of consciousness in an accelerating exponential technology world of AI, quantum computing, and robotics. And Fred LeFranc, who was in attendance, really loved that talk and pulled me aside and said, we really need to be friends. And we started to just have these amazing conversations. We spent a lot of time hanging out there. I learned a lot about him there. And towards the end of the event, he started to tell me the story about Joe Dispenza workshop he went to. And the reason he brought that up to me is I said in my presentation on Necker that I just started to read Joe Dispenza's book because of John Mackey, which is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And I was talking about how much I enjoyed that book, how it actually starts out talking about quantum physics, which was really cool. Anyway, so he brought it up to me and he starts to tell me this story about this guy that he continues to run into. And he's like, damn it, this is a synchronicity and I'm totally missing the fact that I keep running into this guy and not getting his phone number. And then he said it was the last part of the workshop, thousands of people there, where he runs into you again and becomes friends with you. And there's something that happens there that I'll say in a moment, but just pick up where I left off, because he finds out that I'm actually part of the synchronicity story.
Yeah.
I've never been to Joe Dispenza workshop, but tell me about that.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. I was at the Dallas Dr. Joe Dispenza week-long retreat. There's approximately like 2,500 people there. It's just a phenomenal production that he puts on, like 7 days long. And yeah, I met this guy the very first day. His name was Fred, and Fred and I really connected. My dad's name was Fred, right? And so this Fred and I really connected, and then we kind of went our own ways. And there was tons of people there, but we just kept bumping into each other during different breaks or different sessions, and we'd sit by each other and talk and all of this stuff. And and then it was the last day. So I was.
Were you at this one?
Wasn't.
You weren't at this one? Okay.
Yeah, I was just there by myself.
Yeah, you're just by yourself.
And it was the last day of the event, and they hold just like Lauren was talking about, these healing sessions, like where they put, the person, the healee, is laying down, and I was the healee. I have an eye disease that causes me to not be able to see very well, and so I was down there as the healee, and then the healers come and they sit on 4 chairs next to each other, and there's hundreds of healees laying down in this event with 2,500 people. It's all divided up, right? And all of a sudden, like during this meditation, when Fred gets into a deep meditation, sometimes he kind of has this little laugh that happens. And
you can see it's a joyous guy.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's a beautiful, beautiful human. And right when that happened, I don't know, I just kind of like felt this different energy and like very powerful, like when I'm laying down, and I heard that laugh, just like when you hear like one of your favorite songs, you hear like the first chord and like you just immediately know it's that song, and you start to turn it up and like you're ready to go. It was like that with Fred. Like I just heard the little bit of it and I just knew instantly. I'm like, oh my God, Fred's here. Like this is wild. Like of all these people, like I'm seeing Fred again. And so
you'd seen him how many times already?
Oh, over a dozen, right? Like
which is crazy.
You just kept bumping in, out of all those people, right?
Probability wise, not
huge space, huge space. And so after the session, like Fred was just like I'm teary eyed, right? Fred's teary eyed, and like we're just talking and hugging, and immediately he's like, I don't know what this means, but like we have to connect, like we got to meet up, like this is too much to be a coincidence, right? And that just kicked off like this beautiful friendship.
And then how does Jason Carpenter say?
Yeah, so Fred knew about my eye disease from this conversation, or from the Dispenza event. And a couple weeks later, after that event, or maybe it was a couple months later, but Fred and I were communicating, and he's texting me. He's like, "Hey, I'm on this call with this guy Jason, and I think he just told me he had a similar eye disease that you have. Like, what's the name of your eye disease?" And I'm just like, so I text him back, and like he's on this, this call with him, and he asked Jason, and then Jason says the same thing, and like Fred just like lost it. He's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it's a very rare, rare eye disease, and so Fred was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to meet Jason. Jason's healed himself from his eye issue, which is, supposedly unhealable. Right. And he cured himself with food and like this diet. And that's what really started and propelled Jason off into this new chapter that he's been living in.
And he really talks about that deeply on this podcast.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story. Just amazing. Amazing. How he went through everything that he did to get to have the universe show him like where he needed to be.
Yeah.
And, and so then, Jason agreed to like meet up, and so then we had kind of met up over lunch, and we just hit it off immediately. I mean, we just had so much like in common, and we just, both shared this deep passion for helping humanity. And long story short, we become good friends. He's become an investor, and
then he became one of your largest investors.
Yeah, one of our largest investors, a huge supporter of Evolve and like everything that we're doing. We're just so aligned. Like, and I remember him telling me about Human Co. and like what he's doing and how he wants to help heal humanity through food, through healthy food. Right. And it was just like, and he had a lot more context behind that. But, I was just like, oh man, like you're saying the exact same thing, but if you interchange like food with technology, like that's our mission and like what we're doing. And so it was just this very natural, amazing unfolding of like how that all came to be.
So then going back to Necker.
Right.
So Fred starts to tell me that the guy that he met, which I had, actually I hadn't met you.
Yeah, we had met, and you had invested.
Yes, I had invested already. So, but he starts telling me about the guy that he met and the eye disease, and then the fact that he connected this hedge fund guy in New York. And keep in mind, I'd never met Fred until this event. Okay.
Right.
And we had seen each other at Conscious Capitalism event. I used to serve on the board of directors there. So we'd seen each other at these events, but never really talked. And this was the first time for us to really get to know each other. And I'm like, you're not going to tell me this is Jason Karp, are you? And he said, how do you know? And it was like so crazy. And so Fred actually told that story at the end of the Necker trip. We were all sitting around dinner with the group. There was about 30 of us there, in terms of the synchronicities of the divine or consciousness, or, I mean, just the probability wise that he's telling me this mind-blowing story on synchronicity to give me an example of a synchronicity.
And then
he finds
you're
out
having,
that I'm part of the synchronicity.
right.
And he's like, okay, this is just crazy. And then the synchronicity continues. So the part that maybe you didn't know is, after Necker, in the future, I did this trip to Maui. And Fred asked me if I had any trips coming up. And I said, yeah, I'm going to Maui, for spring break. And he said, oh, well, I'm really good friends with Peter Merriman. And Peter Merriman is kind of like the Tyson Cole. In Austin, we have Uchi and Uchiko and Uchiba. Now they're spreading across the U.S., but they're our best restaurants. And Tyson Cole's the founder. And Peter Merriman's kind of that guy in Maui, the best restaurants. And he's like, can I set something up for you? And I'm like, yeah, Fred, that'd be really sweet. Thank you. And I'd happy to do the same thing for you in Austin. So he sets up a dinner. And it actually, he didn't realize this at the time, but it was in Necker where we got the price from ServiceNow of what they were going to pay to acquire Data.World. But we're still negotiating on some terms, et cetera. And so it was later on in Maui where the docs were finalized and were getting signed. And we signed on our side. And we're waiting on them to sign. And it was a very long day of waiting. And about an hour into it, I felt this really strong feeling in my core that deal was going to sign over dinner. And it was the dinner that Fred set up. I'm at the dinner. It signs within 5 minutes of the dinner. It was the best meal we had on the island, not just because of the deal, because the food was just exceptional. We had this sunset that, in Maui, the sunsets don't even look real. I mean, it's like just so ridiculously beautiful. And the check comes, and the waiter, I hand the credit card. He says, that's not going to be necessary. I'm like, what do you mean it's not going to be necessary? And he hands me a card, and it's from Fred.
Wow.
And he paid for the meal. Wow. And he didn't even know.
Oh, correct.
And so I texted him from there, and I was like, you have no idea the synchronicity of you booking this and paying for the meal on this day. This I didn't tell him what had happened. I said, I'll be able to tell you in the future. But that was the day that me and ServiceNow signed it, like on that day.
That's awesome.
So it's like synchronicity just continues. So amazing. And then the deal, that 7 is a very important number to me. So the synchronicity, the deal was announced on May 7th, and then it closed on 7/7. And this is ServiceNow's timeline.
Yeah.
It's not my timeline. We wanted to get it done as ASAP, right? Awesome. So it was, it's so cool. It's so cool now. I've been praying for Fred, and it's so cool that he's cancer-free now.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So maybe we're part of that team that we're praying for Fred
to
be cancer-free.
Yeah. He's been on, quite the journey dealing with his battle with cancer. And, I think it's just been remarkable to watch. The positivity and the hope that he held the whole time. And, we spend part of the summer in a mountain house in North Carolina, and Fred lives in North Carolina. And so we invite him and Lauren, his wife, out to spend some time with us out there. And
Lauren's word.
I know. Yeah. We joke about that. Yeah.
And Lauren's amazing.
Lauren's amazing. Lauren is
absolutely
absolutely amazing as well. And, it's just been so cool. An awesome journey.
I can't wait to host him in Austin. I've told him anytime. And, he's just an amazing human being.
Yep.
So I know we're running a little bit long here, so I want to ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up. So do you agree with me that that it's this lifetime where we could manifest as humanity an age of abundance for all because of this technology acceleration, which I think, we conquer our fear and not destroy ourselves and realize we're all divine at our core and realize we need to work together, then we're only governed at that point by the laws of physics. And we don't even know what the laws of physics are because there has been no reconciliation between quantum physics and classical physics. And so I think that, we get to that point, then it literally means abundance for places like Chad, where the GDP is $660 a person. I write about in my book about Kalavu, who picked me up at 4:30 in the morning on the way to that MIT conference, where, I really got to know him. And I was like, what's the solution here? How do you help a country like that? And I was like, robots, AI, like this acceleration to the point where you could send in an army of robots and they go and build all the clean water and all the electrical supply and all the solar grid and everything related to healthcare that they need in a country like that. And if you could build ACES in Chad, you could build ACES anywhere.
Yeah. Right.
Do you think it's possible?
Yeah. Where'd you go first?
Yeah, I think anything's possible.
Yeah.
Right. So absolutely. I think, as with anything, I think it's going to be our consciousness, right? As humanity and as individuals that essentially guides that path, right? Because we can throw tons, as we know, right? We can throw tons of resources at anything. For someone that's in a lot of trauma or survival, there can be a ton of resources, right? Kind of given to that person, but it's going to depend, how are they perceiving, right? Their state, how are they perceiving the world, right? All of that as well. And so I think it's going to have to be both paths, right? It's like, we're going to have this opening of access to resources through technology and like all the examples that you gave, but then is humanity going to be able to meet it, right? And that's really kind of the big piece. And I think we are seeing this massive acceleration in consciousness. I mean, even things like the telepathy tapes, eventually becoming like the top podcast and all these things, people are just opening up and there's a greater level of awareness. But I think we just also have to remember that it is our consciousness and our directed thought that is creating the technology. And we are embedding within that path, right, our consciousness. And that's going to essentially be the end result over time. And so I think just over this next couple of years, I mean, the time that's already unfolded, but particularly over this next couple of years, that's just going to be the integral piece that really determines where do we fall, I think on the timeline. And I'm super hopeful. I'm definitely in the camp of this can all unfold beautifully, but I think it's going to be up to a lot of the leaders that are really driving a lot of these changes in the technology to be in the right level of consciousness to drive this in a direction that, the right place for humanity.
Totally. And we have to be very real about the efficacy of what we have today that's the norm, like these antidepressant medicines, et cetera. Like I'm pro-pharmaceutical in the sense of like antibiotics are a miracle cure. I mean, if I ever get a sinus infection, it cures me, without the constant struggle. Yeah, I'm super pro-pharmaceutical, but for things where it has to do with the brain, like a antidepressant medicine, the efficacy is really poor. I mean, it's really horribly poor.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculously poor. And then we know that opioids are addictive. So, but yet those are legal and prescribed and, and frankly, we're pushed on people. We know about the big case. And so we've got to be really honest about where we're at and be very clear-eyed and not act like, hey, this one thing is taboo, even though it's known to work. But this other thing is legal, even though it's known not to work in almost every single circumstance. And, we do have very real data that the loneliness, depression rates are going up dramatically because of the algorithmic manipulation and lots of other forces, maybe all the toxins too. So it's really going to take solutions like yours to help with the consciousness awakening. And like you said, to help these leaders, it's probably They're both 1,000 human beings, which oppress 8.2 billion. And I'm not suggesting a violent uprising. Like I'm suggesting, Gandhi like approach to deal with all of that with love. But those leaders need to have a heart shift and heart change, and lead with love more than lead with fear. Like it's kind of the angel debate of like Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, humanity just needs to be controlled versus Eastern philosophy of, all the beauty comes from within, which frankly is the seed of Christianity. The kingdom of God is found within you. Judaism, tikkun olam, like let's repair the world. That's the core mantra. Buddhism, Hinduism, et cetera. I explore all of these in my book, but we just have to be really honest about where we're actually at. Like not pretend like we don't have a problem. We have a serious problem.
Oh yeah.
Or that it's out of our control.
It's out of our control. Exactly. I mean, we have free will. Like we have tons of agency.
Right.
We've never had more creative power than we have right now.
That's right.
So it sounds like you're pretty optimistic, and I'm optimistic too. Part of the reason why I'm optimistic, I'll just outline really quickly is, we made it with nuclear weapons so far. Hopefully we continue to make it. I'll just tell you one stunning statistic, because I wanted to look this up out of my own curiosity, because I bet you most people don't know this. Actually, I'll ask you a question, because I did not know this. So this is unfair for me to ask, but literally I did not know, but I'm just kind of curious. Like out of all the nuclear weapons we have on Earth today, what percentage do you think it would take for us to destroy the world if they were set off of the ones that we actually have today?
Like pretty low.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
You're really close. Okay. So I would have guessed way differently. Just to be honest, it's 2%.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have 50 times more than we need to destroy the world? And by the way, 2% would destroy every city, every major city on Earth, and create a nuclear winter, which would kill billions of people. It would darken the skies.
Yep.
And then I was like, okay, if I was an alien and I came to Earth and I'm trying to understand the human race, I would zero in on that. And then the next question would be, are we making them? And we're making a ton in the US, and China's making a ton. Right? China's actually in a race right now and make a ton of nuclear weapons. So why? Because of mutually assured destruction, which is a psychological trick of like, if we make these things, then we won't destroy ourselves. The acronym of which is NAD. I mean, that's acronym.
Yeah.
That's, and by the way, I didn't make up that acronym. I mean, it's just is the acronym, but it literally is in all the literature about mutually assured destruction that they use the acronym. You would assume that we're insane.
Yeah.
And you'd be right. I mean, just like you would assume we were insane when we used slaves, you would look at that and be like, how on earth did we have slaves? Like treating people as subhuman. But anyways, we did make it with nuclear weapons. I know that's a little bit of a dystopian side bent there, but it just is shocking to me when I actually look at the numbers. Number two is we made it with smallpox. We really, when we had an existential risk, we got going after it. And number three is something that I learned from a friend, Byron Reese, which I've already said a few times on this podcast, which is there was a point in time, hominids have been around for 4 million years. Life on Earth has been around for 4 billion years. The hominids are very new, but Homo sapiens have been around for 250,000 years. So like we're very, very new from an evolutionary standpoint, and we're built for evolutionary speed. And 50 to 70,000 years ago, we were down to somewhere between 800 and several thousand Homo sapiens. And I had to like really fact check this. This came from Byron Reese, who's one of my best friends. He'll be on this podcast, and he's written some of my favorite books. The last book he wrote is called We Are Agora, about how the whole planet, if you think of it as Mother Gaia, is a functioning organism, a superorganism, like a beehive is. A beehive actually regulates its temperature and everything else. So he was making the case that we're a large functioning superorganism. And it's a really beautiful book. And he was approaching it scientifically, not spiritually. Although he is a spiritual person, but he was approaching it just pure science. It wasn't a spiritual book. But I learned that through him. And the way we made it, because we were in the ice age and there was a super volcano event. So it was kind of like it was like a nuclear weapon, frankly, that it darkened the skies. So now we're freezing and suffering with no sun. And the only way we made it is to pull together. And so if our core nature was evil, like we would not be here today. That would have been the end of the human experiment. So that's what gives me hope. I usually ask what you guys are doing to make sure we make it. And it's pretty obvious what you're doing at this point and how you're putting it all in the field. I know you have 2 children. We have 2 children. And that Jason and Jessica Carp have 2 children. And, it really matters for them, but I'm operating at a place of love for all of humanity. And I really mean all. We're all divine and beautiful at our core. Some people have many levels of programming that can really make them, not a very nice person or really someone who's very broken. But my prayer for all of humanity is we realize the divinity at our core and we have that collective awakening, realize that we all have so much in common and that we need to overcome this squabbling of my religion versus your religion, or my country versus your country, or men versus women, or my race versus your race. Just realize like we're so genetically identical. And that's a big part of what my book, the most audacious part of my book is part 3, which is on transformation. How do we actually transform? And one of the things I would love your guys' support on is I'd love to profile you in that part because I'm finishing that part of the book with case studies. I think kids are a perfect case study of like people really putting all in the field.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. That sounds great.
Well, cool. This was amazing. You guys are such a beautiful couple and such amazing people, and you can tell you're leading completely from the heart. But you're also both very smart. So you've got the head activated too, and ultimately you're doing something very ambitious that's going to be very, very important for the world. Really appreciate you guys being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Love Conquers Fear. The lineup coming up is unbelievable. I mean, just better and better in terms of who's showing up for this and different people coming into my life. I was just speaking at a conference this week called DealCon, and it's all about M&A. And that speech that I gave at the conference, there were like 5 people that showed up that are making introductions to people that would be absolutely perfect for this podcast. I also got a LinkedIn recently from someone who's a quantum physics expert who's invented all types of technology in terms of consciousness that I'll be introducing to you guys. And I'll also probably have him on the podcast. But it's a long list coming up of amazing scientists, amazing philosophers, amazing spiritual teachers, investors, and entrepreneurs. So stay tuned for more exciting episodes. I'm enjoying this journey, and I hope you are too. Go Team Humanity.